you know the company Theranos? I feel like more people should know about them. I've seen a lot of suggestions from people saying I should talk about them, but I haven't heard too much outside of that without seeking it out. Not as much as I would expect anyway, which makes me think that it's not reaching a lot of people, but the people that it does reach, it tends to have an impact. It did for me anyway. I don't often use this word unless the situation really calls for it, but this is ridiculous. They were this 11-year-old technology company out of Silicon Valley, valued at about $9 billion. The reasoning behind the valuation was that Theranos had created this piece of medical technology that was going to revolutionize parts of the industry. It was this seemingly magic little box where you put in a single drop of blood and it'll quickly test it for cancer, diabetes, and about 200 other common illnesses. No need to take that large vial of blood, send it into the lab, wait to get the results, and it was all contained in this cool looking portable box. They called it the Edison, and just imagine the practical uses for it. Ambulances, military use. This box would make it possible for you to go to your local Walgreens, give them a single drop of blood, and then have them deliver you the same day test results. I'm sure that sounds like a dream to anyone who routinely gets their blood tested, and that's what was starting to happen. They teamed up with Walgreens to have these Theranos testing centers in their stores. At one point, there were dozens of these centers all around Arizona. Here comes the ridiculous part. That was all in 2014, and in October of 2015, it came out that the entire company was a complete sham. Those Edison boxes and the technology behind them that was responsible for the $9 billion valuation were pretty much nonsense. They simply didn't work. I know, it sounds unreal, like it's the plot of a poorly written movie, so I'd like to talk about how they pulled it off. Just how were they able to make this happen? The first way is a little abstract, but I'd argue that it's the most important single factor. Elizabeth Holmes, she may be one of the most ambitious people that the world has ever seen, meaning having or showing a strong desire and determination to succeed. She was the one who started the company in 2003 when she was 19 years old, and in 2014, she still owned half of it. The fact that she owned one half of a $9 billion company meant she herself was a billionaire. In fact, she was the world's youngest female billionaire. Going all the way back to grade school, she would talk about becoming a billionaire one day. In high school, she got straight A's all the time. She had this small coding-related business. She was even learning Mandarin. For college, she went to Stanford to major in chemical engineering before dropping out to start this company. Not surprisingly, Steve Jobs was the person she most looked up to, another person with a tremendous work ethic. She was recruiting key people from Apple to work at Theranos early on, and even went as far as to wear the signature black turtleneck. Can we agree that this was an ambitious person? I think of the phrase, "you can do anything you set your mind to," because if you ever had any doubt about it, here's the ultimate example. She literally made billions of dollars from a box that didn't work. To go along with the ambition, there was also a tremendous amount of lying. Quite honestly, this whole subject just makes me a little angry. The idea of lying to people to advance yourself and your own interest to a point where you're actually harming others. Remember, the promise was one drop of blood can deliver timely, on-site results for a variety of illnesses. That's how it was advertised, and really, that was the idea behind the whole company. Well, here's the reality, and again, I want to point out how ridiculous this is. When a patient would take the test at Walgreens, most of the time, they were simply performing a traditional blood test. Instead of taking the drop of blood, they would take the whole vial. Instead of doing it in the store, they would send it to the lab. Instead of using their Edison box, they would use other equipment that they simply bought from a different company. Meaning the entire process was identical to your typical blood test, and in the end, Theranos wasn't doing anything unique. Everyone that they did business with was under the impression that they were doing something unique. They had to be very selective when finding investors, because anyone who demanded to see it in action or the science behind it, well, obviously that wasn't going to happen. But they were very sneaky about it. They would say, no, it's a trade secret, we can't reveal that. Then the investor would just say, oh, that's fair enough. They built up to some pretty big investors too. Rupert Murdoch, Walmart, Walgreens obviously, were all investing millions of dollars with them. Now, the majority of the time, they wouldn't use the Edison at all, but sometimes they did, and that's where things got really dangerous. It was not uncommon for a test to come back with false results, pretty much because they weren't capable of being accurate. Just think about that. The customer has no real reason to think otherwise. They took the test at their local Walgreens. treatments. And now they're looking into medical treatments, medications, lifestyle changes for something that they don't even have. They were messing with people's health, and I don't even know what to say. Let's move on to the next reason. It goes along with the lies, but you have to admit, this was a great story. If it were true, of course. As it stands, it's a terrible story, and I think that's why the public was willing to put aside their doubts. A 19-year-old college dropout creates a multi-billion-dollar company that changes the medical industry for the better. Now there's the inspirational, feel-good story that we all want to hear. The next one is compartmentalizing. That's a long word. That means Elizabeth and the leadership of the company were sure to keep the employees focused on their own separate things. That way they wouldn't figure it all out. It's like one of those paintings where it just looks like dots when you stand close, but as you back up, you start to see the whole picture. Each department was working on their own little section of the dots, without knowing how they really tied together into the big picture, because if they had stepped back and looked at it, they would have learned that the picture was not coming together. They would even block off certain parts of the lab and lay everything out in a way that made it hard to converse. Pretty manipulative stuff. There was bullying. Let's be realistic here. People who worked there were starting to figure it out, and Theranos was doing really well at keeping them quiet. They would have them sign non-disclosure agreements, because remember, their technology was a trade secret after all. So those agreements made people afraid to come forward with anything, or if someone did start asking too many questions, they would be threatened with lawsuits. They would essentially bully everyone into staying quiet and out of their business. That's not a full list of how they did it, obviously, but there you have some pretty effective ways of how to build a multi-billion-dollar company without actually having any value. Not that I recommend anyone does it. In 2015, everything was exposed and it all started crumbling down. The man that we have to thank here is Tyler Schultz. He was the Theranos employee, brave enough to stand up to the threats and come forward to a Wall Street Journal reporter about everything that was happening. The article about it was published in October of 2015, and that was the beginning of the end. Walgreens cut their ties with them soon after. The company lost most of its value, as did Elizabeth Holmes. The SEC started a fraud investigation that was settled with a $500,000 fine, which could have been much worse. As of 2018, Theranos no longer exists. Elizabeth Holmes basically maintains that she never did anything wrong. She didn't know that this deception was happening, but it really looks like she did. Almost anyone involved in the situation will tell you that she knew, and I think common sense can almost tell you that. She was the founder and the CEO of Theranos, so what else are we supposed to think? There is a criminal trial set to start in July of 2021, and I am very curious to see how it goes. The charges are wire fraud, which is defined as a crime in which a person concocts a scheme to defraud or obtain money based on false representation or promises. You also have to do it using electronic communications, but this does sound like something that she may have committed. A few other things about this scandal that I found important or interesting. Sunny Balwani is worth mentioning because he's possibly the second most involved behind only Elizabeth Holmes. He became part of the company around 2009 when he provided a multi-million-dollar loan and then ended up becoming president of Theranos despite not knowing anything about the industry. It's all very odd. He's also going to be part of that trial with the wire fraud charges, and to add to that, he was also confirmed to be romantically involved with Elizabeth Holmes going back to 2003. So there's a whole situation that I don't want to dive deeper into. And then, this is odd, Elizabeth Holmes is known to speak with a very uniquely deep voice that many people around her have accused of being fake.
Every person should have the ability to get that type of test, because
I don't exactly understand her motivation behind it. I suppose it may make her more charismatic or likable somehow. Memorable, maybe? I don't know, but I feel maybe we could add this to the list of lies. And then we have this. Tyler Schultz, the whistleblower who blew the lid off the whole thing, he was the grandson of George Schultz, who was on the board of directors and happened to be the U.S. Secretary of State during the Reagan administration. And there's more family involvement. Not to read too much into this, but Elizabeth Holmes is the daughter of a former vice president from Enron, which is a much larger, more publicized scandal. When looking at this, I think some of the lessons here are obvious. Business ethics, overall honesty, I mean, the deception here was out of control, and as people, we have to be able to have some trust in the world around us. And I take a less obvious lesson from this in earning something. Being honest with yourself, would you be happy with that level of success, knowing what you did to get there? The lack of morals and respect for just about everyone around you, putting them in financial or even in some cases physical harm. All I'm trying to say is maybe the journey is more important than the destination, and how you get something is more important than what you have. It's all stuff we already know, but maybe sometimes hearing something like this can help you appreciate the value behind it. Wow, alright, moving on from that. That was my overview, but this is a deep topic. If you want to learn more about it, I recommend this book called Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. The author of it is actually the reporter from the Wall Street Journal that communicated with Tyler Schultz, the whistleblower, and essentially broke the story. If you're not a reader, there's also an HBO documentary called The Inventor: Out for Blood in Silicon Valley, and a story on 2020 called The Dropout. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes? They're so closely tied together. I think I've made my feelings pretty clear. Like many others, I want it to be true. I want it to all be a legitimate success, but sadly, it's not the case. This has been a very depressing video. It's scary to think that they went unchecked for so long. It makes you wonder what's going on right now that we don't know about. It's like when I find a spider on the wall and then I'm freaked out that they might be all over the place. Alright, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Does it work?
Yes,
You're confident in that?
I am confident in that.
Thank you for watching.